Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julia Middleton, and I work with the Rural Health Initiative. The mission of the RHI is to engage partners to share ideas and expertise and to support communities in improving health while stimulating a higher level of wellness across the state. Thank you all for joining us today for the webinar, Fundamentals of Grant Writing, presented by Kelly Peterson. Kelly provides proposal development and project planning and management services for post-secondary institutions, nonprofit organizations, units of government, and private foundations. Her work as a consultant since 1998 has included a broad spectrum of successful projects in workforce development, rural health, community and economic development, and rural development policy. During a portion of this time, Kelly also served as Deputy Director for Minnesota Rural Partners, the state's rural development organization, providing program development, grant application planning and writing, and oversight of grant and contract compliance issues. Prior to 1998, she served as New Projects and Grants Director for Region 9 Development Commission. We've also personally worked with Kelly at our office, and I'm really looking forward to her presentation today. Just a few technical details before the presentation begins. All the lines have been set to mute. To unmute your line, you can press *6. Throughout the presentation, if you have questions, please type them into the question box. It's on the sidebar located towards the right of your screen where it says Type Questions Here. At the end of the presentation, Kelly will answer these questions that are typed into the box. And without any further ado, Kelly, if you want to get started. And just a reminder to press *6 to unmute your line.
Thank you, Julia.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yes. All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and you sound great, and your slides have just come up.
All right, thank you very much. And thanks all for Montana Office of Rural Health for organizing this webinar. I hope that in this very brief time I can provide you with an overview of some of the components of proposal development. It is going to be very short for a lot of short time for a lot of information. And things I'll try to cover today are factors in planning a project and application, finding the right funding source, an overview of proposal writing fundamentals, and tips for quality proposals. I'm going to try to keep it to about a half an hour or so. First of all, please understand that in most circumstances, moving an idea from an idea to a funded project takes time and effort. At a minimum, you should plan for 6 to 8 months, perhaps even longer if the funding source is federal government. With scarce resources, collaboration or coordination is often critical to the success of a proposal. Competing with your neighbor or duplicating another organization's strategies isn't helpful for anyone involved. So, in fact, most funders will include partnerships in their reviews. My point is just don't go it alone. Also, I want to stress the importance of evaluation. Evaluate or demonstrating value to your customers, funders, and policymakers has never been more important than it is today. The evaluation used to be an afterthought. I can remember writing proposals and we just say, yeah, okay, we'll evaluate, and that would be enough. Now, even occasionally draft instruments are requested. And for big projects submitted to both public and private sources, I rarely work without the expertise of an evaluator, whether it's internal to the organization. But my advice is try to locate and work with one early on, particularly for those big proposals. And last, something I just wanted to mention about what I've noticed lately, and pay attention to what people in your industry are talking about. It seemed like years ago that priorities were need innovation, capacity, jobs, and cost savings in that order. And now conversations start off by talking about cost savings. Jobs is still big, and innovation, capacity, but need seems to be sort of at the bottom of the criteria at this point. To just mention a couple of the types of grant sources. You have your public sources that could be a local, state, federal government. There's private foundations. They generally like to be more creative in their funding strategies, and they're looking for innovation. And they're also very focused on their organization's mission. And then there's the corporate giving programs. They like to give close to home so that it benefits the communities in which their employees live. They'll give as a marketing tool or to attend a special interest of a board member or executive. If you're thinking about approaching a corporate giving program, look for links to the company in your community. And where to look? For federal sources, there's a number of resources to look. There's grants.gov. That's also many times the portal for which you submit applications. There's also the catalog for federal domestic assistance. And they both have search functions which can be helpful. I'm just going to show you the catalog for federal domestic assistance real quick. This lists every program, whether it's open or not, if they keep an archive, so you can find programs that have been closed for a number of years, but it helps with a little bit if you want to look historically. And then you can find a program even if it's not currently open, which is helpful, because a lot of the federal programs, they'll become open around the same time of year each year if it's an annual program. So you can look back, perhaps download a previous guidelines document. So please use that. There's also grants.gov, as I mentioned. Sometimes it's helpful to monitor the Federal Register, which is a daily publication where you can find rules and regulations before a program guidance is published. Oftentimes that's their public notification site. So if they have want comments back. There's also agency websites, newsletters, or other publications and email lists. So I encourage you, if there's an agency that you're looking to apply to, make sure you get on their list and visit their websites and find information that they can push out to you. State agencies, many have email lists as well. It looks like in Montana there are several that have sections of their websites that provide information specifically about funding opportunities for them. There's also foundation directories and online services. There's quite a few of these, and most of them are subscription or some sort of fee. What I've used in the past are grantstation.com, the Grantsmanship Center, the Foundation Center. There's also one called grantselect.com. And many states have directories that are published of state foundations. I'm in Minnesota, and we're just sort of blessed by a number of private foundations that are larger and generous. So we have a fairly robust foundation directory for the state. I haven't seen the one for Montana, but it's my understanding that MSU Billings publishes the one for the state. And the Foundation Center has a national directory. Also, many associations or technical assistance organizations that you may belong to provide newsletters or policy updates. You can watch for funding opportunities there. And then also personal and professional networking, talking to folks at meetings. Meetings, you can learn a lot about upcoming opportunities. And identifying funding prospects. Much of this is common sense, but people really get excited about their ideas and they have a passion for their work. Hopefully, that's why they're doing it. So it's just normal to assume that everyone will share that same passion if only they could just hear about that project. But that isn't always the case, and folks can spend a lot of time chasing a funding source that will never be interested. So here's some guidance on what to look for when you're doing research on funding opportunities. First, priorities and issues. There should be some cohesion between the funder priority and your organization's purpose. Geographic focus. Check the guidance to be certain that they fund in your geographic area. Many foundations, for instance, limit by where they have plants, or if it's a corporate, I should say, corporate-based foundation, plants or offices. Some public grants are targeted by community size. Amount funded. The amount you need should be in their range. If their funding history indicates they generally give very large awards and you only need about $10,000, they want to look elsewhere. And types of funding, most of the time you'll see funding for project support. Some, not many, foundations will offer general operating support, but usually any program, whether it's from public or private, specifies the type of activities, like training. Some do matching grants, capital, research, technical assistance, participant support, and there's many others. Type of awardee, again, look at the funding history of the program or the foundation. If they only fund private nonprofits and you are a K-12 school, you also might want to look elsewhere or get some clarification before you invest a lot of time. Length of funding. A glance at their history will help here too. If you need multiple year support to make your initiative work and they only fund short-term programs, that's not a good match either. Submission review and timeline, making sure that this meets your schedule and planning needs. And initial contact requested. Many private foundations may request a letter of inquiry, or more common now is a preliminary proposal submitted online. Make sure you go through that and review any guidance that they've published. And I wanted to say also, sometimes when you get into this, particularly with large or a federal program, and it seems like there's a lot of money and it's going to go to 2 or 3 organizations, but it seems to fit yours perfectly. Generally, if there's a lot of definition on the type of organization and type of work, and there's only a couple awards to be made, there's a possibility that those fundees have been predetermined and have worked with that agency for a long time. So just I've seen a lot of folks that get really excited about an opportunity, but there's very little chance. So I just want to say, just be wary of that. It's hard to see a lot of time invested by folks and nothing come of it. And then I want to talk about the importance of pre-proposal contact. Just a little bit about the difference between public and private. Private funders are generally less staffed than public, unless it's a large foundation, like a Kellogg or a Robert Wood Johnson or something like that. But they also have fewer restrictions, and what their funding is based on the interests of their board members or trustees. That's set into their funding priorities. If it's possible, try to develop a relationship with a grantor who values the same outcomes that your idea suggests. Try to create some link that will make you and your proposal immediately recognized. And this could just be a conversation or email or an introduction at a meeting. But if you can, cultivate a champion within that funding organization. Also, open yourself up to the idea that your approach is perhaps not the only way or the best way to produce the outcomes you seek. And program staff person or foundation staff person might have some good ideas or related information that could help shape your efforts. And then when you contact public sources, as you know, many will have webinars or technical assistance calls. Participate in those when possible. Email or telephone a list of contacts with specific questions as you're allowed. The earlier you can start doing that and getting clarification, the better. You can also try to learn from past grantees. If you can find a previous or current grantee that will talk to you about their experience, both the application and implementation processes. You may want to, when you're looking for one of those, find a funded project that wouldn't be in direct competition with you if there's another round. So someone may be in a distant location or a different type of organization. And, you know, you can ask, there's all kinds of questions you can ask, but some common ones that might be helpful are to, you know, if they expect the average award size to change, will current grantees compete with new applications? If there's a matching dollar requirement, ask them if it would improve your chances for funding if you provide a greater match percentage. If no match is required, you could ask them if it would help if you volunteered to provide match anyway. And you can also ask them about the most common mistake or flaw they see in proposals that they receive, and any areas that they haven't seen addressed that they might like to see it addressed. Most of this will be outlined in their guidance, but sometimes there's you know, a few things that you can learn from talking to them directly. And when you contact private sources, again, the most important thing is understanding the funding organization's mission. Your objectives and theirs must be similar. They'll fund what they want to and what they have stated they will, and usually not much else. I heard once the foundation director was saying that was talking about the importance of trying to make a connection to board members of a foundation. And this person had said, you know, 1/3 of their grants would be awarded to board members' favorite nonprofits. 1/3 will go to board members' friends who've made a pre-proposal contact. And the last third will go to those who write a creative and persuasive proposal. I'm not sure, you know, if that's true today, but having that connection in some way to make your idea stand out is always beneficial. Questions you might ask a private funding source is if they would look provide a review of your proposal if you got it to them before their deadline. Asking them about the funding award size, look at their average and ask them if it would remain consistent with that. Perhaps, you know, perhaps you have two sources that you'd like to support, jointly support a project if they would go that approach. And finally, you could ask them if they are familiar with other funders who may be appropriate for your project. And they go to industry meetings just like you and I, and talk to each other, so they might know who's interested in something similar to your project. I'm not going to touch on this much, but well, many times your funders will request that you submit a pre-proposal or a letter of inquiry that provides an overview of the project. This pre-proposal, often submitted online, likely to include sections similar to those submitted for a full proposal, just more brief, and they include those items on the screen there: innovation, mission match, need, solution, what's going to change in your next steps. Skip over that sort of quickly and go into, so we have time for the sections of the proposal. The first, we'll go through abstract, summary, introduction, problem, methodology, organization, information, evaluation, sustainability, and budget. And I'm just going to try to give you some tips on each section, some things to think about as you're putting these parts together. So The first is the abstract, but write this part last. This is maybe your most important and most difficult effort of the proposal. Its quality will determine whether or not the reader examines the rest of your proposal. You should write a simple summary of what is to be accomplished, how it will be accomplished, how the project will be evaluated, who will benefit from it and how, and what it will cost. Don't provide any new information in this section. Don't use it as an extension of your narrative. And try to relate your work to the funder priorities. Introduction. This section introduces your organization and your qualifications for funding to the prospective grantor. It also serves to establish your credibility. Your programs and your accomplishments will be examined within the context of how you are currently addressing the needs of your community. It's your opportunity to demonstrate to the funder that you have the means as well as the creative ability to solve the community needs your proposal addresses. Be sure to describe who is applying, your organization, the rationale for the application, beneficiaries, a bit about your organization, just briefly. All of this is a short introductory section, but it should lead logically also to the needs statement. Nice transition there. Would be good. The problem and need statement. In this section, you'll want to state the need or problem clearly. Don't exaggerate. Be sure to provide data that exists to document the problem. Your goal is to create a compelling and accurate assessment of the problem. Be sure to describe your target population. It could include statistical analysis, results of surveys or literature reviews, any information you've gathered from community forums or case studies or key informant interviews. It should also demonstrate the need for your methodology. So logically, the problem that you're describing would logically be addressed by the activities that you'll describe in the next section. Include maps and charts and tables of what your the service area that you provide, that you serve, I should say. Any kind of tables with data and charts. I would like to say that particularly when you're working with a public sector or federal, I should say federal funds, you can, don't assume that they even know how your local government or organizations work. They're often, not always, but sometimes you can get some that are far removed from, rural communities particularly. And I live in a largely agricultural area and can remember one federal officer who came to visit during a site visit and a project, and one didn't know what silos were, the grain storage, and the other one explained to them how they could blow up at any minute. So they had some clue, but not exactly. So, but an effective need statement is jargon-free and describes the situation in both factual and human interest terms. As you write your problem or need statement, try to answer these questions. Does your proposal demonstrate a precise understanding of the problem or need that you're attempting to solve? Try to justify why your particular focus has been chosen. Does it establish the importance and significance of the problem? Do you include citations to ongoing studies as well as other earlier project findings? Does it provide a rationale for your objectives and methods? Does it make the reviewer want to read further? And does it indicate how the problem is related to your organizational goals? I'm going to go on to the methodology and work plan. This is the meat of your proposal. The work plan will include goals, objectives, methods, or activities in your timeline. And it's easy to confuse goals and objectives, but goals are long-term and objectives are short-term. Goals are general, while objectives are specific. Your goals should complement the mission of the funding source. Your objectives should help move you toward that mission or your mission. move the funding source toward that mission, I should say. Goals describe long-range benefits. It could be a vision statement, and here's where you want to utilize emotion if you do. Objectives state what will be done and when, and should use measurable terms. So I've included some examples there. Goal would be to reduce substance abuse in teenagers. The outcome objective could be to decrease alcohol-related arrests among 15 to 17-year-olds by 15% during the first year of the project. And a process objective might be conduct 12 parent-child prevention education classes in the first year of the project. I hope those are that's clear, or give you an idea of the differences. Then I wanted to add some tips for writing objectives. Try to include at least one objective for each need listed in your need statement. Be sure to state the time frame within which your objectives will be accomplished. Make your objectives specific and measurable. List your specific objectives in no more than 1 or 2 sentences. And list your objectives in order of importance or expected chronological order. And don't confuse your objectives, which are the end, with your methods or activities, which are your strategies which you can accomplish. There's a table on this page, on this slide, that lists a nice work plan table. But use this section to describe your project activities in detail. Indicate how each of your objectives will be accomplished. Describe what precise steps you will follow to carry out each objective, including what will be done, who will do it, and when it will be done. I think a good way to do it is just assume that you've been giving the grant. And so what's the first thing you do? What's the next thing? What's next after that? And so on. The use of time and task charts represents one successful means of clearly communicating the methodology section in your proposal. Also be sure to describe responsibilities and staffing and list any innovative techniques. When you're writing your methodology section, you can tell you, but often having that like a cost-benefit ratio, what's the cost per individual or per patient per hour of instruction or some comparable unit is helpful. It shows value. You want to mention any risks that you've identified, but why your success is probable. Again, uniqueness. Have others tried this? Is there reason to believe it will work? Why you chose these strategies over others. If you utilize a consultant, make sure to explain his or her role. And this page is, you can see it all, kind of small, but it's an example of a simple Gantt chart created to serve as a timeline for a project. And it wasn't done with any expensive software. It's just done in Excel, and it's just a way to get everything. This is what happened to be for your project around getting students to finish their degrees, actually, get back into a pathway. So anyway, it doesn't cost, you don't have to buy any software. You can just use your spreadsheet. Organization and personnel. Utilize information from your brochure or website. Stress the relevance of your purpose and mission. Describe the area served by your organization. Highlight success stories and unique qualities about your organization. Use quotes from clients or others that support your organization. Why are you best suited to complete this project? And then finally, qualifications and responsibilities of your staff or those to be hired. Highlight years of experience, publications, presentations, awards, special recognition, as well as a number and dollar amounts of grants and contracts that you've carried out successfully. Evaluation, I mentioned earlier how important that is nowadays, and Now, the need to demonstrate outcomes and results really dictates that the evaluation section be robust. These days, I mentioned I always work with an evaluator, get this person involved in planning the evaluation component as the application is being developed. But try to think of evaluation as a way to pinpoint what's really happening in your project and a mechanism to demonstrate value and need to funders, to beneficiaries, to board members, to policymakers. Be sure to identify precisely what will be evaluated, describe information you will need, and how you'll propose to collect it. Clarify how you will analyze and use the information. You may be asked to include a sample instrument or two. Make sure that you include a separate evaluation component for each project objective. It really forces you to examine the clarity of your objectives and helps you write things that are more measurable. Will make them easier to be measured and easier to document your success. If your evaluation is done outside your organization, make sure you identify costs, credentials, and experience. Again, this is really important when you're doing large proposals. It's less, you wouldn't have a robust evaluation for something that's much smaller, but overall, with any proposal, you want to make sure that you're asking key questions about your project. Examine it and use information for future planning. But how well did your project achieve its goals? Were the activities implemented as planned? And when I always like to look at too, or were there any unintended outcomes? Sustainability is tricky. You're really expected to demonstrate your capabilities to extend or continue your project beyond the funding period. So do your best to identify potential sources of funding and try to explore options including fees for service, any product revenue, memberships, anything that could provide revenue. At the very least, illustrate a plan that starts the day of your project to generate continued support. Identify who will take responsibility for continuation development, but be careful about including costs for these activities in your request. Some funders will not support those activities, even though they require you to be thinking about them and doing them. You may want to include a list of other funders you've approached, showing the name of the funder, date of request, amount of request, and current status, and trying to show minimal reliance on future grant support. That's always a tough one, and probably the most fictionalized section of a proposal. A budget. Think of your budget as an alternative way of expressing your project. Every budget line item should reflect an objective or strategy. If you haven't described it in an objective, there shouldn't be any money for it. So it is really a financial illustration of what you're going to do. I should be able to look at your budget outside of your narrative. If I look at your budget first, that should provide a clear picture of what you're going to do, your methods. Incomplete budgets are examples of sloppy preparation. Inflated budgets are signals of waste. And budgets that are too low cast doubt on the planning ability of the applicant. I was just on a call for the State Office of Rural Health continuation funding, and they had a little webinar, and the fellow from the agency said that's what I look at first. And if that's not right, he said then there's a big problem moving forward with the application. So budgets are important, and they really are used to illustrate what you're going to do. I just want to mention direct costs and indirect costs. Direct costs are those that are can be attributed directly to the implementation of the project. Indirect costs support implementation but are harder to attribute directly. These can include things like electricity, space, office equipment, some administrative or management costs, and others. This is a big topic, but I just want to make sure that you know the difference. If you apply for federal applications there, you'll see reference to indirect costs, and there's a whole process that organizations can go to negotiate that. Generally, it's not done by many organizations unless they get lots of federal applications. So it's probably not something you're going to have to worry about. Someone, if you do apply for a lot of federal grants, someone in your organization will know about that. But be sure, so when you're thinking about your budget, be sure to illustrate the base of your calculations. Be familiar with the components of your fringe benefit rate, include increases with multi-year budgets. Try to be as specific as possible. You can't just say, sort of, this is miscellaneous travel for $10,000. You should break it out with mileage, hotel, any airfare or that sort of thing. That's an example, but and how you came up with each amount for those items. Put in your formula. Meet any matching fund requirements and identify matching contributions, their justification and source, and be aware that most of the time federal funds cannot be used to match federal funds. Remember that your budget is a projected or estimated cost. Everyone's aware that things can happen to influence those costs, between that long period when your proposal is submitted or when you start implementing. Most funders will give you leeway in expending project funds as long as the project scope does not change. 2 more slides. Letters of support and commitment. They're often part of the submission package. I think of letters of support as more just an acknowledgement of the work you're doing, or sometimes you're just required to notify people and they have to recognize that you notified them in a letter. But in these letters of support, they don't often actually make it into the application. You just include a list of them because of page limitations. In that case, a form letter with a supporting organization just filling in the blanks will suffice. But many times you have to demonstrate commitment, and I recommend original letters for that. And requesting a letter of commitment from your partners or other funders, provide the basics. This is the purpose of the program we're applying to. This is what we intend to do, and here's how you would address a letter and send it back to us. And then ask them to compose a letter of 1 page. Just make it simple. 3 paragraphs. Have them describe their organization, the importance, their perspective on the importance of your project, and their commitment, and put in dollar values if there is a dollar value in their support. Last, start on this process early. You need to let your supporters respond on their own schedule. Finally, overall tips: follow the instructions. Can't stress that enough. Follow all the rules, page numbering, font size, header usage, others. Read and reread the guidelines. Sometimes they're over 100 pages. It's easy to miss something. Don't forget the viewpoint of your beneficiaries. It's easy to get lost in what your organization needs and forget really about who you're serving and what the impact might be for those people or organizations. All proposals you create should take your organization toward its predetermined goals, meaning do not stray from your mission to chase money. Remember that the grantor is concerned about meeting its program's goals and objectives, not yours. Grantors want to know what their grant will solve or have an impact on. Give yourself time, particularly if the process requires you to gather information or documentation from outside sources. And if you have a stomach for it or the time for it, get someone from outside your organization to review the proposal if you have time. So that's that. Good question.
Thanks, Kelly. That was great and full of a lot of very useful information. Just a reminder, if you have questions, to type them into the question box. It should be located on the right-hand side of your screen. In addition, the Rural Health Initiative will be releasing applications for the Incubator Mini Grant Program next week via our listserv, and they'll also be available on our website, which is montanaruralhealthinitiative.info. Again, that's montanaruralhealthinitiative.info. And this would be a great opportunity to apply the information that Kelly presented here today. So far, the only question I've got is, will the slides be available after the presentation? And yes, they will be available. You will receive an email with a link in it, and that will take you to both the recording of this presentation as well as the slides if you want to check out some of those grant sources that Kelly mentioned. Are there any other questions? All right, hearing none, I'd like to thank everyone who attended today. We appreciate your participation and your support of the Rural Health Initiative. And I would especially like to thank Kelly. You must have done such a great job that there aren't any questions, and this information I know will be useful to at least us at the RHI and hopefully to everyone else who participated today. Again, the recording and links for the presentation will be available probably by tomorrow. And with that, have a great day, and thanks again, Kelly, for a great presentation.
Thank you.